Opening opposition is going to win this debate very simply. We are going to show you the high threshold to action and why our message is the only one that gets people to actually act. Before that, sadly, we have to disagree with opening government framing on this debate. Because think what the comparative here is about what kind of emotional appeal are you doing. Are you guilty for not acting now, or would you be a good person for acting later? Let's just say why this is the correct comparative. Let's first of all address the two things that opening government is trying to tell you. A, about small things. When you can be complicit in small actions, right? You're complicit by not donating. You're complicit by voting for that politicians. We don't know why small actions are inherently opposed to complicity. You can also say you're complicit because you are buying from Nestle and Nestle is bad because you're doing this thing. We don't think you cannot target governments and larger bodies with complicity either. But note, call to action is almost inherent to complicity because we're saying you are failing by not taking an action. You're inherently highlighting the action that is not being taken and saying this is an important action that should be taken. So we don't think we can ever have complicity without a call to action. I don't think I've ever heard about a campaign or media campaign that did not have a call to action. I don't think this is the comparative we have to defend in this debate. Note that on the comparative to what opening government has said, everything they tell you about short messages is symmetric because the same format applies to both. There is the same format of emotional appeal. Before I get to everything else, let's take up on government and give them a chance to react.
How will you listen to the action of the plan if you turn off the advertisement before they get to
Okay, thank you. I just want to repeat one of the points they made. I'll continue to the rest of my rebuttals. Note, two things about this. We think, A, the question of whether something gains media attention to become viral, etc., depends on the quality of the emotional appeal and how much it actually impacts people, how much they care about it, and how much they react to it. Not about whether they like it or not, because there are other things that are lovey-dovey, but nobody cares about and gain no traction because they're not interesting and they gain no appeal. We don't know why there's such a large delta. Second, as we said, you can say other people are complicit as well, saying Nestle is complicit is fine, and therefore you get the same impacts they want of saying, look, we should all hate Nestle and boycott them. This is a successful complicity campaign. You got them to boycott Nestle because Nestle employs slave labor in Ghana. Great job. This is great. This is what we want on the opposition side of the debate. Look, we are now going to do three things for you in this speech. A, we're going to talk to you about why negativity is just much more accurate than being positive and why it has much more impact. Second, why this is the only way we can get a significant change. And finally, why it also affects governments and corporations. Let's start with why negativity is so much better than everything else we have. We think the difference between negativity and a positive message is negativity says what you are right now, and a positive message says what you can be in the future. So when you say you are negative something, you say they are guilty right now. You are complicit right now. You are a bad person right now. You don't tell them you can be a good person in the future. And this is a much stronger emotional appeal because it addresses their state right now and it blames them right now for something. And therefore it's much more emotional coherence and much more emotional appeal compared to telling you could become something. Because they can become a lot of things. And many things promise them dreams in the future. Very few things address how they are feeling right now and therefore have a lesser impact. But we think more than that, in society we just have a strong narrative of do no evil. This is in the Hippocratic Oath. We grow in it in children's stories. This is what the laws we have. This is what we use in debates all the time, right? Negative rights are more important than positive rights. We have this massively strong narrative that we take with us, all of which says that doing a bad action is worse than not doing a good action. When you're implying that right now they're doing something bad, that right now not doing action is itself bad and they're guilty right now, you are actually utilizing this narrative in favor of action rather than in favor of inaction. You're actually utilizing this narrative to force them to think, yes, we should actually do something because we're right now taking a bad action by our inaction. You are actually changing this basic dynamic and utilizing the strong narrative in your favor. But finally, we think there is something inherent to complicity that when you say you are doing something wrong right now, you're giving them a feeling that they can make a significant change in the world. Because no, when you just highlight the problem and say we need to take an action, it's unclear why this action is going to solve the massive problem we are comparing to, right? So OG is trying to we'll go for very, very small impacts and not solve the fact that there is massive problems. We want to go for these massive problems. And we say, when you give you complicity about themselves, you give them a small problem that can solve, that leads to the big problem, but you tell them solving the small problem is the goal. This is what is important. Not solving the big problem because you're guilty of the small problem, and the small problem is what you need to solve to be a good person. Therefore, you give them the motivation to solve the small problem, which is the action they need to do. I can motivate them to the correct action rather than trying to tell them, look, you're going to take this small action, that's going to lead to another action, that's going to lead to a bigger action. Eventually, it's going to solve the problem. It's not what we're trying to do. We are giving them much more digestible information. Look, we think finally we should note that many times complicity and going to people who are complicit is the only way to make a change in this world. Because many times the people who are directly responsible for the harm do not care and won't take any action. If this is a dictatorship that does not care about public opinion and does not care about the massacres they are committing, if it is a company that's focused on its profits and doesn't care about the damage it is causing, only by appealing to people who actually care and have leverage over it can you do that? If it is consumers from this company, if it is democratic governments, if it's corporations who are more brand aware and don't want to be associated because they care about their brand and prestige, if it's leaders and other positions who need to be hired as somebody to be CEOs or CFOs and don't want to be associated with negative companies so they can hire the top talent. All of which means that you get them to care by influencing them with leverage from other people, which is uniquely strong on our side and has massive impact, and we have no alternative to it. Before I continue, should closing.
In order to get people to go to work, we have the positive reinforcement of them receiving a salary. And in order to bring actual humanitarian change, we need to have positive reinforcement that actually drives people to work and change.
At the point in which they're already taking action, they're actually going to volunteer for a charity, they're actually boycotting, they will get positive reinforcement from the social environment, from being with other people who agree with them, from meeting other people who help them. What we need to do is get them to take the first action before they get positive reinforcement, and note work also has negative reinforcement as well, which is stronger. You're not just going to get a salary, you're going to get fired if you don't do the work. If you don't do the work as a child, if you don't do the work in school, you get punished, right? We use negative reinforcement because negative reinforcement is effective. We want to continue using it for this as well. Finally, why do we think this has a strong influence on government and corporations? Because the governments will rightly say, we're not going to get everybody to act, right? We're not going to get everybody to care about it. But no, this is asymmetric, because there's almost never a group of people who cares in the other way. There's almost never a group of people who are going to say, look, we actually want to solve people in Darfur, we actually care about this positively. So when you get a group of people to carry the other way around, politicians can easily win votes by shifting their stance because only one side strongly cares about the debate. Only one side has strong influence, right? And this is true for corporations as well. They can do a lot of brand damage with certain voters by continuing their behavior, with certain consumers by continuing their behavior, and they are not going to harm themselves with other consumers by changing their behavior. So you just need to shift a small portion of the voters, a small portion of the consumers to have a large impact, because these companies can actually gain the benefit of getting those consumers back. These governments can get those voters back without sacrificing any other constituency, because they are just going to things that have no counter support. So we think we have a very strong influence at that point. At which point we think, unlike opening government, we'll show them why people are going to get over this stronger and higher emotional threshold. Why feeling guilty right now is actually going to lead you to take action, even on big causes, because we break it down to small causes effectively, and why this leads to actual change in the world. For all those reasons, we call on you to oppose.
People do not like being told what to do. If you tell someone that they have to act and that they are guilty for something that they genuinely don't feel guilty for, they're much less likely to listen to you than if you tell them that they can simply reinforce the idea they already have themselves, which is probably that they're a pretty decent person by doing that other thing that's already aligned with the idea they have of themselves, that's already aligned with the life they think they are living. We think one message is much more convincing than the other. A 15-second campaign is simply not enough to convince you you're shitty enough to take action if you don't think you are. That's the bottom line of this debate. Before we move on to adding some more analysis to kind of the claims that George has already brought, let's do some rebuttal. So, just to clarify on their comparative, the initial thing they told us, which is that this is a comparative between guilt and positive reinforcement, is correct. What is not correct is the thing they said later in this debate, that this is a comparison between negative and positive reinforcement. They do not have negative reinforcement. They can't punish someone for not acting. It's not like school, it's not like a job, because you do get a reward if you act, but you don't get punishment if you don't. This is the main difference that we have in this debate. So we tell you that the best way to get them to act is to guarantee them this reward beforehand, to focus the message on what the reward is likely to be and to get them to like that result. Now, some more specific responses on what they told us. Pretty much, the main thing they told us is that telling someone you are bad right now is more likely to make them act. I've told you that most people quite disagree with that, right? Because A, most of us like to try to gaslight ourselves to thinking we're decent enough people, because we simply like to think so, and because we think of ourselves like that. But secondly, we think that like a 15-second campaign or 20-second campaign which is also something skippable that you can very much move forward on our side of the house, is really, really not something that can convince you otherwise, right? And no, the thing on positive and negative publicity is not the same, right? Because you're simply unlikely to care enough to leave negative comments and backlash on these campaigns. They'll just keep scrolling. They don't get the publicity on their side of the house because of negative reactions for the people. They just get people who call bullshit on the campaigns because they find them unrealistic and just move forward with their lives afterwards. That's what they get on their side of the house. On the things that they told us about small problems versus big problems and actions, I'm going to be honest here, I really, really don't understand how this works. They conceded that the actions both sides are talking about are kind of similar. We present them positively, they present them negatively. I don't get why they have smaller actions and more tangible actions. They need to explain that a lot more. Lastly, yes, on the more general point about how this is likely to make people more passionate, to potentially get political change and that sort of stuff, George has already mentioned, and I'll double down on that later, that things like scapegoating and things like blaming others are much more possible when these campaigns are in focus on the fact that people themselves are complacent, right? Because this is mutually exclusive. It is a short campaign. You probably don't have the time to clarify that you yourself as an individual are complicit, but also that your government is a bigger part of the problem. No, we think this is mutually exclusive to a very big extent. So we think that it's actually much better to focus on actionable things to fix that government, to fix these companies, and to make people listen to these actions. Before I move on with case closing.
Yes, okay, we get donations. What's happening with donations in your side and what's happening with those donations on our side?
I don't know, I presume the same thing. Moving forward. Okay, case. George has explained to you why people are more likely to listen to these campaigns to begin with, right? I'm less likely to skip a YouTube ad if I'm not annoyed by the company making it within the first 5 seconds because they're calling me an asshole when I don't think I am. I'm less likely to scroll past a post that I find unrealistic and unrelatable. Why is that awareness, in and of itself, even without any action, very, very, very beneficial? Just having listened to the message of this campaign. 3 things here. First of all, they're simply more aware that they should exist, right? On the very, very bottom line about it. This means that it's possible for this to work as a starting point to streamline them into learning more about the issue, into potentially learning more about what they can do, into potentially learning more about the cause. The bare minimum that they have to have is awareness that the problem exists. This is more likely on our side of the house. Secondly, they're more likely to integrate it into their daily thinking to an extent and to internalize that narrative. Simply because we tell you that people like to think of themselves as good. This is quite consistent in our case. So if you tell them that you as a good person can help that good cause that does the stuff that you like as a good person and you can feel even more good about yourself, they're likely to do that to an extent, right? This means that they're more likely to consider this issue in their day-to-day lives. This means bringing it up in conversations all the way to considering it the next time they go to vote. Third of all, we tell you that at the very, very, very least, even if they don't internalize the issue or learn more about it, they're not opposed to it. The next time they hear that company's name, they kind of know what they're doing. They kind of know that it's a good company, that it's a company I like, so I'm less likely to oppose them. I'm less likely to take away funding and support from them. We think this is a good thing regardless, because overall, I think the majority of people that cause damage to environmental causes are not the ones that don't help. They are the ones that block them. They are the ones that actually think that the issues are not important or that these issues cannot be helped by them. We think we change this narrative on our side of the house. It's much more effective than what they brought to us. Now, why are more people also more likely to act on our side of the house? 2 things. First of all, a guaranteed return. This is the thing I also mentioned in my intro, right? On their side of the house, you tell them you're a shitty person for every single thing, right? There's a campaign telling them they're shitty, that they can't fix world hunger. There's a campaign telling them they're shitty, that they're not reacting to environmental problem. There's a campaign telling them they're shitty because they're not reacting to flooding. This is simply overwhelming. You don't know why or what you can do with that, even if there are actionable plans for all of them. This guilt tripping isn't that effective. If you don't know how to fix it, you're more likely to skip past it. On our side of the house, we give you a guaranteed return. We tell you that it's worth it to donate to that cause because this is what that cause is doing, because this is what you're going to gain, because your money is going to go into these tangible results that you've already achieved. And we think that people are still likely to care, right? They're not likely to get complacent and think that the issue is being fixed because it's literally basic human understanding, right? Even hearing that 80% of the world has water, if the figure is any less than 100%, any reasonable human being would understand that that's kind of a problem, right? So no, I won't take any more. So yeah. Any reasonable human being would kind of understand that. This means that guarantee that their money will go into good use is the best thing they can have in order to donate. Because people like having their money. They want to give them to someone reliable. But secondly, we tell you that the campaign is simply more trustworthy to them. To be frank, people don't want to hear that they are complicit because in most cases, they are not. People in the West that hear that they are complicit for world hunger live so far away that they can simply not understand how they can be responsible for these issues. If the messaging of the campaign sounds a lot more realistic and reasonable to you, you're more likely to trust that company with your money, you're more likely to give it to them. Yeah, thank you.
Madame.
Where is my clock? Okay, is the panel ready? All right. I'm starting now. Panel, what we are going to do is very simple. We're all basically winning by emotional investment. We're simply going to use it to respond directly to things we're getting from OG and show you why they are winning whatever they said in this regard. And basically in terms of taking their last response about where you feel more ability to actually change those things and create a more significant change where most of the problems happen on the other side of the world, in both sides of the house, because this is where most of the humanitarian problems happen. We are going to show you why you actually have more capacity to make people actually come and believe they can change it and pressure people to change things there. So let's start from rebuttals in terms of what they're saying in their impact. Because what they're saying is like, look, first they're saying that our narrative must be very offensive to the people who watch them for some reason. Like they'll use you're shitty, you are an asshole, things like that. We don't think it's very likely for many reasons because there are those companies that generally want people to donate to them. This is unlikely how Complicity is likely to take action in the world. They're likely they're likely to take like marketing experts. They're likely to have like whole investment, like whole infrastructure building in order to actually understand psychology of people and understand how guilt actually works and how it's likely to happen. It's not like telling you are a shitty person. They're likely to come to say, look, there are tons of bad stuff happens far away from you, or like that you're not aware of those. Like those people are actually suffering, and you can change it. Why? Because your government actually does bad stuff to support those things. Like they don't do it directly. Like the liberal government is complicit in terms of they allow those companies to act. It's complicit in terms of supporting those other bad regimes because it helps the diplomatic instances. This is how it's likely to happen. And even in more direct instances, we are talking about the people that say you are complicit because you are a democratic person with the right to vote and make change in the world. You can take it because you're not acting, you are responsible. And you can become a better person. You're not a shitty person. You know you want to be a better person. This is how we like to happen. This will be like in a very short, like if they're saying like 6 seconds ad, like there's no impact at all. We are probably talking about at least 1 minute ads. We're talking about campaigning. We're talking people actually see. Otherwise, like there's no like delta at all because no one can see any message in 6 seconds. Like people will skip them anyway. Now, the problem about positive reinforcement that they're saying about this, they say, look, if you're feeling bad, you are less likely to actually act because you're feeling bad. Or if you feel good and your parents feel good, you want to become a good person. This is like problematic for many things because they admit that the cost for donations and volunteering and going to protests and things like that is very high. It takes your time, it takes your money, it takes a lot of resources from you. It means that the cost for interest to actually give up on a new phone compared to donating to some person you don't ever know is very high for you because you can gain immediate benefits for you. So you need to deal with the threshold of egoism. When you believe that you are already a good person because you live in a liberal society and you believe that you're doing like just enough stuff, you don't feel accountable for the things that happen there. You say, well, I'm already a good person. I don't need to be an extra good person. It doesn't give any meaningful impact on me. However, if you feel that you are a bad person for the things that already analyzed, you weren't rebutted at all, but why you are likely, those messages are likely to work in the narrative that you grow in, it means that you are ever like emotional investment. Say, well, I am responsible because those bad things happen and I have some accountability to them and I can change them. So if I want to feel like a good person, the only way to get rid of the guilt is actually helping to actually donating, is actually volunteering, is actually going to demonstrations, is actually changing my vote. This is the only way, because if you don't feel emotionally attached, you are likely to simply skip them away and not just see the old ad. If you feel emotionally attached, you are more likely to see what's happening there. In their side of the house, they say you can be a better person and don't want to scare you, so don't see anything negative, so you are less likely to actually go there to a long run. Before I continue, second, you have extension.
I am a black trans woman living in the US. Am I really complicit in ending world hunger? Am I really the one to blame?
If you are a black trans person, you are likely going to be emotionally investment and already donating for numerous other reasons. The vast majority of people, we're talking about the vast majority of Western people who are like generally of white descent, who are like from rich countries. This is what most people are the ones more likely to wear, who already have white guilt, who are likely to actually trip to guilt in auction to actually donate. This is what we're talking about, this is where we actually have a delta. So, why we actually get a capacity for change and talking directly about things that we are getting from OG, because OG come and say those things are very far away and as such very hard to connect to them and things like that. No, we completely agree. Most humanitarian problems happen in authoritarian, non-Western places, which means that most people who donate it do not live in the places where those bad things actually happen. It means that we actually need to bridge the gap between me, which feel like in a world which is like perfect and good and like there are some issues for me that are very important for me, and the things that you don't see, don't hear about, and you can just ignore because I can never change it. Now, complicity campaigns. No, I want to take another one. The thing that complicity campaigns focus only on like low impact stuff like global warming is simply false. Why is that? Because remember, Western people live in a democratic liberal society. What do I mean? It means that they are born in narratives, they are from childhood, they tell them that you are accountable to the actions of your government. You are accountable to the actions of bigger companies. Everything that happens is something that you can vote and you can change. If you choose to ignore it, it's because you chose to ignore it. You are like have the ability to choose the government. You have the ability to have the power as a part of the people. Those are the narratives you are going from very young age until you are an adult and you still follow them. This is what people vote, because voting is not a rational thing. Most people will not feel like they can actually want to vote, it can't actually change. However, the narrative is so strong to make people actually vote. Second, people live under humanistic values. They believe that they are the center of the world and have control over their own lives, and they can change the world if they choose to do so. Again, those are liberal countries, those are liberal values that are likely to be imprinted from a very young age, and such they believe that in terms of accountability, I'm accountable for my government action, but I have the capacity to actually create changes. As such, those mechanisms are very important for them. Now, so the delta is not between small impacts or big impacts. It's like changing the things that happen around you and things that happen far away. And what we're talking about, we're looking at, for example, France who supports authoritarian regimes in Africa in order to maintain access to uranium and important resources. We're talking about the US selling weapons to the Middle East for its own diplomatic reasons and actually being complicit in war crimes even though they don't actually do it directly. We're talking about big companies that, for example, just pollute the world in other sides of the world, like they throw their garbage in Nigeria, but the US is fine and they don't deal with them. What does it mean? That now that people feel that they are accountable and can change those things that happen in the other side of the world, because they know that according to their voting patterns or the things that they do, they can actually influence the government, they actually influence the communities. The fact that they will go to demonstration will mean that those big things will actually listen to them. It means they have more capacity to create change in our world. In their world, all those problems are really far away, and I can change it because this is a authoritarian bad person who only can be influenced by the people of their own country, and as such, if they can change it, I obviously can change it. This is what happens in their world. So only in one world you can have more capacity to actually donate to people who offer humanitarian help for those people who are currently starving, and as such, the pinnacle of positivity we can still show how it's over those things. Please, something. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Panel, in my favorite TV series, The Good Place, there is no one in paradise. You know why? Because the world has been so complicated that no one deserves to go to paradise. With this motion, I'm so proud to be CG because we oppose putting someone guilty because no one feels can be in paradise. No one feels that actually with one action can do well. Two things from CG. One thing, why it cultivates the whataboutism narrative, and second, why the intersectional people are more harmed about even from the 5-second video. But some rebuttal first. We have all here running a whole case on the golden child syndrome that the whole society have. The problem is that if you are a golden child in at home, even after that, you have your psychological problems. But in society, it's even more bigger. You work from 9 to 5. You have personal life. You have so many things, and you have. I tell you, complicity works with guilt, and humanitarian campaigns actually try to access your empathy. This works because even if you have the same day and the same routine, you want to make a change to help someone, a cause that is close to you. But the problem is that whatever you do, you don't see the actual change. And at the same time, you have someone telling you, oh, you don't work hard enough. You're not the good child that you have to be. And you have another cause telling you you are not working hard enough even for us. And this is bad because it fits our case in our first argument that I will explain in one thing. The thing is that OO says to us that basically you don't feel the need to feel extra good. I tell you that in the everyday lives that we have, all of us want to feel a little bit extra good. And the thing is, for the whole liberal societies and the economies that we have been brought in, we are pleasure-oriented. We are not guilt-oriented. The thing is that if you focus, it's not that we won't have people that actually will do the hard work. We will have. But the thing is not the focus to be on the guilt. It's different to say, well, look, you can come with us and plant trees together. It will be super fun. If you have time, come and join us because it's nice company and you can feel extra good the moment that you are doing this, rather than saying, you city people that you all buy from saying, you should be a saint. This is really important because people getting disengaged. Okay, first thing. Why it pushes the whataboutism narrative. Okay, the thing is that I see homeless people, I see drug addicts in my neighborhood, and I feel that I want to help them. At the same time, I have in my feed after work a campaign that's saying to me, that tries to access my guilt and trying me to feel bad after a long day, that I feel tired, I feel that I want to do something good, but this is my resources in my everyday life. The thing is that, okay, maybe with the guilt trip, I do it, and I save some money. What is the impact that I have the next day, that I'm again tired, that I'm again feeling disappointed from my everyday life, or I have an average life, and I don't feel fulfillment, I don't feel this existential prize that I did something good for my world. You know what happens? You do it once, you do it two, maybe you help the homeless person in your neighborhood. When this piles up and you still are fed with guilt and that you don't do enough, you disengage. There is, what about this? Whatever I do, I don't see an impact. I don't see a tangible impact. And at the same time, even if I see a slight impact, I don't get the fulfillment, because exactly with the metric of OG that we want to be, that we want to be the good children, I don't feel that I am rewarded at some point. I feel that I'm getting punished again and again. So what happens then, panel? The thing is that day by day, gradually, I am becoming a more whataboutism person. We are talking about the average person that has the job, that doesn't have a specific cause, but wants to make some change to feel the reward, okay? But these people are more prone to, if they try, to get whataboutism, don't even feel like they will feel helpless in front of the people, even in the street. And why this is important? Because the people with the street, before that, you were walking by them and you say, maybe I can do something. And maybe I donated in this humanitarian aid and I felt good because no one punished me. But at the same time, when this narrative piles up, you don't even see the homeless person as you pass by him, because you think, whatever I do, he will be there. I cannot help me. The problem is really the impacts of us. It's in each individual that this shapes the perception they have on humanitarian aid. Two, about the intersectional argument. The key is that most people that are targeted by this complicity are not actually complicit to the structural inequalities that lead to the humanitarian crisis. You can be a poor person in Europe and you are not responsible for your great-grandfathers, and you feel attacked. Why I should be responsible for the colonialism actions that my ancestors had? You feel more guilt and more disengaged from the cause, rather than in the other side, you feel that you can actually do, or even be mediocre to that. You don't need to act. You can be mediocre and don't have a backlash if they attack you. So also, this attacks people, for example, that maybe they are intersectional. It's an African American woman that she's not, she wants to help Africa, but at the same time, she doesn't feel once she has to work so many jobs that she can help. And this harms her identity. It harms her community. Look, panel, our impacts are simple. We believe that donors and money and crowdfunding will be marginal, will be symmetric, because CSR policy, etc., both they have incentives in both worlds to give money, and maybe some people will give some more. But the thing is, not feeling that something that you do affects the vulnerable, and this affects your whole perception towards humanitarian aid, and affects you gradually, and affects you at every action that you do. Your perception towards humanitarian campaigns and their trust to them and their result becomes reverted, because they're attacking you. They don't reward you. For all these reasons, CG.
I'm sorry, this is for funding reasons. I'll put it right here. I can only do so much. I don't want to touch it.
Put the microphone on it.
Oh, ready? Anna? Yeah?
Yeah. Put the microphone on it.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Just put it on the chair. Focus 있으니까.
Good enough. You're holding it.
May I start?
Put it around your.
It'll be very distracting for me. All right, let's start. Okay, ready? I'll start my speech. No. Up until now, the debate focused on the amount of money donated or the action taken to the campaign, and this is held up as the metric for the debate. But there's two things I never got in first half. Two of them are roadmap and delta. One, I never actually got a step-by-step guide about how guilt or the lack thereof leads to more action or more money being donated to these campaigns. And two, I never understood why guilt of complicity or pride of actually helping is such a big delta in this debate that it's over the other emotion that you feel on the other side of the house. Therefore, because we are never shown any big delta in the amount of money or action taken against on these humanitarian aids, we think actually that the correct metric to judge this debate on is the effectiveness of the humanitarian aid given to them, which leads to better outcomes to the beneficiaries of these humanitarian campaigns. We just think that complicit-free campaigns lead to the need to have more flashy campaigns, more visible campaigns, which leads to bad investments of these humanitarian campaigns. I will start my point about it now. Okay, All right, effective campaigns of investment. How do these complicit-free campaigns actually work, right? We think they focus on positive change that has already happened and already being done. It has to be very visible, right? It's showing stuff that are stereotypically very good, like, a hospital being built or a well being built in Africa, right? It shows good things that have already happened, right? And you also have to wait until that good thing has happened to show it, right? If I have nothing to show that's positive, nothing to show, look how your work is actually helping, I have no campaign to actually continue my donation. Now, why is that bad? For 5 very simple reasons. 1, they need to be very stereotypically visible, good things in the campaign. Notice that these good things aren't necessarily the things that are actually good for the actual cause. They're not the things that actually help the cause the most, right? We're talking maybe about building a hospital. Now, it's very flashy and it's very good to do a campaign in it. We're talking about building wells in Africa. Now, we're never shown why this investment is actually the good ones, and I'll show why they aren't the good ones in a couple of points. 2, they're usually the things that help one region on a very short term, right? Because one hospital is very flashy and is very noticeable against malaria, for example, but it's not as good as, for example, just handing out as many mosquito nets to as many African children as you can, right? You can only do one very quick well in Africa and show it in a campaign and, use it for your campaigns, but it's not as flashy as a very long-term effective investment in the water infrastructure of Africa, right? It's not necessarily the things that are actually helping these people in the short term. They're things that are morally used for that campaign to look like they're doing actual good things. So we know if the metric is to actually help these people of the humanitarian campaigns, we don't think they're doing very good. 3, which clashes exactly with the points of government about you feeling about whataboutism, right? Because they lead to feeling like the problem has already been kind of solved, right? A normal person doesn't really understand the complexities of malaria and AIDS and water in Africa later, right? Because what they see in the campaign is they see a hospital has been built or wells built and said, look, other people have donated. The problem looks like it's being solved or is on the process to being solved. I don't have to actually donate as much, which directly flips what CG says. 3, later, Jesus. 3, they aren't applicable for humanitarian campaigns, which still doesn't have anything to show for it, right? Because and these campaigns may be campaigns that rely on very long-term R&D processes of scientists, right? And these are usually stuff like searching for medical procedures for illnesses, right? These things can take years, decades, like we saw with LS, whatever, the muscle dystrophy thing. These things that don't have actual positive immediate results, you can't see immediate positive change, but they do still need donations, and you only get these donations if you make people feel like, look what's happening to people with this disease if you don't donate. 5, all these campaigns are always focused, and this is a very important one, all these campaigns are always focusing on mitigatory ways to solve the problems, right? Because by definition, if we have a preventative way to solve this problem, it is not seen. It can't be campaigned on because you don't see the child who never got malaria because he got a mosquito net. You never hear about the Haitian person who never got AIDS because they just handed out condoms to people. You can't build a campaign around these normal people. You always build a campaign about, look at this person who has AIDS because we couldn't give them condoms and give them things. Now, and this leads to them, like I said before, investing in things that don't give as much bang for your buck, right? Like malaria hospitals, which could be good. They could solve maybe 80% of malaria, right? But we want better results. We want 100% of kids never to get malaria at all, and we just don't want to prevent them to have malaria, right? And also AIDS medication centers, because they are visible, because they're easier to campaign, right? Now, before I continue to how our campaigns actually look, I will take from opening, yes.
Why aren't people smart enough to understand that giving African babies mosquito nets against mosquitoes that kill them is a pretty fucking good thing?
1, like I said, because you need to actually make campaigns, so your actual campaign needs to have these images to show. And 2, yes, I think people are having a very hard time understanding these things. Not everyone is, learning in college. Not everyone can actually understand how AIDS spreads and how actually giving condoms is much better than giving, high-tech medications. And this actually clashes directly with what your CG says, which people have their own shit to worry about. They don't have the time to actually invest as much time to, learn how all the specifics of these things work, right? So if this is what you're going on, you're directly clashing with your CG, which lowers their impact, lowers your impact, and, all that. How do our complicity campaigns actually look? Because they don't have to show visible things, they can just collect the money that they get from these donations, collect the action that these people actually give to these campaigns, and use it to get the best bang for your buck. Because they don't have to show you visible things, they just have to show that they're doing things by telling you if you don't donate, then you're complicit in this. Now, because first half never showed us that there's any big delta in the amount of donations you get, because they never showed a step-by-step guide, they never showed a big delta, we don't think that's the actual metric of this debate, and the only metric is where do you get the best bang for your buck and better investments. Now, what's the impact? It's just simple, more lives saved in the long term, right? The use of the money is used in a smarter way that isn't necessarily visible, but actually saves more lives. Like I said, actually building better infrastructure in Africa for these people, actually preventing these diseases from actually reaching these people, right? Which means more investment in preventative measures, which kill a problem from its very root, so we don't have to deal with this later. For all these reasons, we just think the effectiveness of the donation is the real metric in this debate, and this is why we should win the debate. And if you don't give us first, you're complicit in making me feel bad, and you should feel bad as well.
If you actually listen to what CEO is trying to push on us as a counterprop, it's pretty insane, right? They're trying to make us defend that it's all sunshine and rainbows and we're just focusing on the wells built in Africa without ever showing, for example, that there is thirst in Africa, without ever showing that there's malaria in Africa or whatever, right? We don't think that we have to take this counterprop. But the key difference, and note this panel, as per the info slide, is that I don't actively go out of my way to make you feel guilty. Right? The info slide says that everyone not helping is considered complicit in this particular instance, right? So, and what we actually have to defend is this thing, is not making people feel guilty simply when they are not actively helping, or when they're not actively marginalized by the problem, obviously, right? So, this is the more realistic counterprop, but let's take them at their best case scenario, right? And say that, you know what? We still have something fairly reasonable on both sides of the house, and that they actually defended something that's, oh, we can drive guilt and get people to change and collect more money because we know we'd have less flashy change or whatever, and we actually focus on the stuff that needs to get done. Even in this case, using the mechanism of guilt does not get you consistent help, right? I will feel guilty about this particular issue, I will donate, then I will skip to my feed later, and I will not stick around simply because I feel like I have done my duty, right? I feel like I'm no longer guilty, I have alleviated this particular negative feeling from me, and now I can move on with my day, which is probably why CO's case does not work, right? But I will deal with them in more extensive way later on this debate. Because we need to talk about CG, right? Because CG is actually the only team in this debate that weaponizes the key harm that we have when we consistently attack everyone as being complicit simply when they are not helping. And the attack, which is actually, and the problem with this, which is actually something that opening opposition concedes when we make a POI, is that we frame this about white privilege narratives and how it's about white privileged people wanting to help others in poor situations, and we exclusively focus on issues that can get those people's attention and can make them feel guilty for being affluent, for being in a advantageous situation, right? And this was conceded by OO to an extent. And the problem with this is that it only talks about specific issues, it marginalizes individuals that do not belong to groups that can help because they feel the guilt. They see the TikTok that says, oh, the West, for example, does not care about the minority in Africa that is facing dire humanitarian situations, right? And as I am part of the West, I also feel the guilt, but I may not be in this particular rich, white, affluent group that can actually help this issue, and I can feel even more marginalized. And more importantly, perhaps, there are other issues in the world that may not be as flashy and as easy to attract someone's attention. And those are maybe the issues that are in your local community, which you may actually be even more guilty of than the issues that they're trying to frame, right? Because there has been an assumption to an extent in this debate that people are actually complicit when they're not helping. But the reality of the situation is that people are probably not complicit for what the great-grandfather with colonialism did a few years ago and established inequalities, right? And trying to get them to believe this narrative is significantly difficult and will marginalize them from the issues they can actually affect and bring positive change, right? Maro talks about the direct results of making everyone feel complicit when they are not actively helping the issue, right? She talks about how people can no longer focus on everything. I go out on my street and I see drug addicts, I see homeless people, I see issues that are close to me, I see issues that maybe I have some sway in. But when I'm constantly guilt-tripped by everything on those issues that I have much more power to actually change anything if I act, I no longer have any energy to act, simply because all humanitarian campaigns have consistently focused on draining me of all my guilt and of focusing my attention elsewhere, right? So at the end of the day, even if we have some short-term change, the fact that this is a phenomenon that consistently goes on, and this is a this House opposes motion, so it's a world's scenario, right? In this particular world where we have this phenomenon, we see that people are already probably pretty nihilistic and desensitized that the world is a crappy place, and no matter what I do, it will still remain a crappy place. Even when I have all those liberal qualities that opposition bench tries to claim exist, right? But what we have on our side of the house in the comparative is that I care more about issues that I can affect, because I prioritize issues that are close to me, I prioritize the people that I can help, and I see that by having positive change, instead of giving $1 to 10,000 charities that have made me feel guilty, I give $10,000 to the homeless person on my street, and now suddenly they can actually afford rent for the next few months, and maybe I have actually made much more of a positive impact in my community, right? So, impacts, less engagement, because at the end of the day, right, I start feeling pretty nihilistic, as I explained to you. Not now, I'll take POI later. And secondly, less change in the communities, because I act for what the guilty marketing makes me think is more important, and not for what I actually can have a more significant impact. And this is exclusive to CG, and these are the impacts basically of Maro's analysis that she explains, right? Basically on the stuff that she proves. Why are they the most tangible? Because, the most realistic? Because this is basically, human psychology does not have unlimited capacity for guilt and unlimited capacity for acting. There are limited times in your day. We explain this in CG, and in your everyday life, you have to act in ways that you can actually try and feel like you're bringing constructive change. Why are they the most important? First of all, because at the end of the day, no matter with what happens with humanitarian aid for big projects, the narratives and the way that people perceive helping others is shaped completely differently on side proposition than on side opposition, right? On side prop, we feel that helping people makes me a better person, and this is why I should try to help people for as long as I can. On side op, I simply try to alleviate my guilt without actually constructively doing this more, right? Secondly, because vulnerable individuals, the intersection of people that Maro mentioned, get targeted by this guilt tripping even when they are not complicit, which means that it's less they also feel guilt in addition to all the other things that they are already being pressed upon, so they become even more marginalized. Opening, yes.
We are happy to save 1,000 babies in Africa for one homeless person in the West. More than that, we are happy to give positive reward by showing the babies saved.
We are not going to save 10,000 babies in Africa, because no one is going to give that much amount of money to save 10,000 babies in Africa, because this is an issue that does not affect them. It's just out of guilt trip that they will give $1 or $2 to feel like they have helped, right? So shifting of attention, yes, let's concentrate change. They actually give to the POI, basically, right? I don't actually put attention and effort into those things because I feel like nothing matters. Let's weigh with the other teams. Let's first start with our opening. Opening government is probably fair to assume that guilt tripping does not work, and they gave us some explanations as to why. But the reason why closing government is more important in this debate is, first of all, because we explain the impacts on the narratives and on vulnerable individuals in particular, and we explain how we managed to make it much more difficult for those people to receive aid, and for people that are also marginalized to feel guilty. This is more important for the reasons I gave to you previously, right? When with opening opposition, we agree to an extent that, you know what, right? We do we think the majority of it will come from straight white people, but we also don't think that framing everyone under the narrative that only belongs to straight white people is fair for the impacts that we provided to you. So our extension works on their best case scenario, which is probably always still win. And finally, CO, because at their best case, again, our analysis and extension works. We don't get consistent help. We marginalize people. Proud to be CG.
The opposition wins.
Get me up! Get me up! Get me up! Get me up!
Okay. Sit. Okay, cool. I'm going to begin in 3, 2, 1. Most of this debate talks about where to get more donations. We are going to explain to you why we're going to get those donations, why we're going to do better stuff with those donations, why we're going to be much more effective with what we're doing with those donations. So in my speech, I'm going to first of all explain to and weigh the heck out of it and explain to you why it is so much more crucial, the clash that we're talking about. And then I'm going just for the fun of it, rebut government side. Cool, let's begin with this. So, why is what we're doing with those donations so much more important than the clash of where will people decide to donate more? First of all, on likelihood. Look, human psychology is heck hard, right? It's almost impossible to actually predict how people will react, especially when it is based on emotional reaction, right? We're telling you that people are unpredictable. We're telling you that people are influenced by so many different stuff. This is why in debate, for example, message arguments are really, really difficult to analyze. This is why. And it might be some team won it slightly more, some team analyzed a bit more, but still was telling you that the likelihood of this case of where will people watch those campaigns and decide to donate more is still much lower than the likelihood that we analyze too, because we are actually analyzing to you how it changes the incentive structure of those organizations. We explain to you that when it is on those positive stuff that government wants to do, it is a really terrible incentive structure for those organizations, and it forces them to do really bad stuff with those donations, or at least much less effective stuff with those donations. And on our side, we're going to remove this terrible incentive structure, which is a much more likely analysis. Second of all, we're telling you that at the end, what's most effective is a lot of time not that expensive, and a lot of time does not need a whole lot of donations, right? We're talking to you about malaria nets, which save hundreds of thousands of people from malaria just by hanging those nets. Those are not expensive. Those need only $1 a piece, and they can do a lot of really good impact just by doing this. And we're telling you that don't need a lot of donations. Same things go for vitamin A shots, which again, those are very cheap, but by giving them, it can do a lot of good impacts and save again hundreds of thousands of people. And this only you get on our side. Notice that the problem is not lack of money. The problem is not lack of donations. The problem is that those organizations are using it in very ineffective ways, because they know that this is not the most effective. They're there. They know how it works. A lot of times the people are kind of experts. But because on government side, they have this really bad incentive structure. On government side, when they need to handle all those flashy stuff, as Prime Minister said already in the clarification, when on their side, those organizations are dealing with showing campaigns of look at all the terrific stuff that we've done. Look at the hospital that we've built. Look at the well that we've built. Look at all of those stuff. All of this is demanding them to be much more flashy, to show you much bigger results, and this is what forces them and ruins the incentive structure. And on their side, they're not going to they're not going to do the really effective stuff. They're going to burn this money on really ineffective stuff. And we're telling you that this is awful. We welcome the decline in this phenomenon. Second of all, we're telling you that we are managing to actually prevent suffering, which is much better than actually just mitigating some of the harm, right? Because even if you have more donations, and you use this in order to just treat people, then it's nice, it's good. We're not opposing that, but you still have a lot of suffering. You still have a lot of pain. You still have very long-term damages that are going to happen from this disease and all that. We're saying that all of those treatment that you can give them are a lot of time just them are mitigatory to the damages, and we're the only one in this room who actually proved to you prevention of these damages, right? On both on our side. On the side of complicit campaigns, this way you get a more malaria prevention nest. This way you get more testing. This way you get all this again stuff that is not flashy, stuff that is not really bringing a lot of look at the terrific stuff that we've done, which is what government wants. But this is the stuff that actually prevents it from the first place, and this is the stuff that can do the most amount of good impact in this room. Notice that. Notice that the stuff of prevention of something does not bring you the good images that government wants. This is not what they're doing, and when you're focusing on that, this is where you're not as effective and as good at prevention as you could have been on our side. Before I continue, take second.
Okay, in order for your analysis to why the money works best and also has to work, you have to take down our analysis, which still stands on how, by directing people to have access and help on the issues that they care the most about and feel more closely associated with, we can achieve more positive and constructive.
Again, even if we're going to have slightly less people donating, what those organizations are going to do with those donations is going to be so much better on our side, which is great and which is much more important. But moreover, let's get into your analysis and just rebut it, because why not? First of all, government tells us that when people watch really sad and depressing ads, this way they just turn it off, skip it, and continue onward. First of all, look, people skip ads either way. This is what people do most of the time. It's not really different. The terrific stuff about complicity campaigns is that when you show someone a really sad image of someone who is hungry, of someone who is starving, of someone who is sick, even this short, and you're telling them this is your fault, even this really quick photo that you skip really easily, still gets stuck in your head. It still makes you think about it. Still remains in your memory, and this is amazing. And this is stuff that specifically those complicity campaigns are doing as other campaigns do not do. So even if they're skipping it, still it is there, and still it does a lot of good stuff. But then they're telling us, but then people are feeling sad. Look, people feel sad, and then they're donating, and then they're not thinking to themselves, well, I'm complicit, because at this point you're not complicit, right? Those campaigns telling you you're allowing all of it because you're not donating, because of you people, you didn't prevent people from dying from malaria. Once you donate, you don't feel this sadness anymore. But secondly, we do think that less people dying from malaria is so much more important than some people who are going to feel a bit sad and then continue onwards with their life, because people do have this ability to just move on and think about something else. But more, and even if they feel bad, we think good, you should. If you're not helping people, you should feel a bit sad. But then lastly, they're feeling like there's nothing to do and you can't help anyone. Look, just as government wants us to be a bit more charitable and say to them, well, obviously there's more stuff to be done, so in their side we expect them to be charitable, to know if you're going to donate money, good stuff is going to happen. Less people are going to die. People understand that. People are not that idiotic.
Let's give another round of applause.